Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Can you try this? Can you move this close? Pull me closer.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
I'll move closer to that. You can move the Dasa closer to that.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Just move this right now. Just put it there. Move the cable. Just move the asana quickly.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtotarshat Shri Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrila Prabhupada Ki Anta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की और प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम. This is 37th text, isn't it? 40th. Okay. They don't have purports, okay. Srimad Bhagavatam 8.7.40. Pumsah krupayato bhadre sarvatma priyate harihi. प्रीते हरौ भगवती प्रिये अहं सचराचरः तस्मादिदं गरं भुञ्जे प्रजानां स्वस्तिरस्तु मे पुंसः कृपयतो भद्रे सर्वात्मा प्रियते हरि प्रीते हरौ भगवती प्रियोऽहं सचराचरः तस्मादिदं गरं भुञ्जे प्रजानां स्वस्तिरस्तु मे पुंसः कृपयतो भद्रे सर्वात्मा प्रियते हरिः प्रीते हरौ भगवती प्रिये अहं सचराचरः तस्मादिदं गरं भुञ्जे प्रजानां स्वस्तिरस्तु मे प्रीते हरौ भगवती एहं सचराचरः तस्मादिदं गरं भुञ्जे प्रजानां स्वस्तिरस्तु मे तो भद्रे प्रियते हरि प्रीते हरो भगवती Sorry. Pumsaha. Okay, Vaishnavis, you would like to recite? Sorry. Wait here. Pumsaha, with a person. Krupayataha, engaged in benevolent activities. Bhadre, O most gentle Bhavani. Sarvatma, the super soul. Priyate, becomes pleased. Harihi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prite, because of his pleasure. Harau, the Supreme Lord Hari. Bhagavati, the personality of Godhead. Priye, also become pleased. Aham, I. Sacharacharaha, with all others, moving and non-moving. Tasmat, therefore. Idam, this. Garam, poison. Bhunje, let me drink. Prajanam, of the living entities. Swastihi, welfare. Astu, let there be. Me, by me. Translation. Can you try the other power project? This one. This is not working. Yeah, it's not projecting at all. Try this one, HDMI. So there is no purport for this verse. So, my dear gentle wife Bhavani, when one performs benevolent activities for others, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari is very pleased. And when the Lord is pleased, I am also pleased, along with all other living creatures. Therefore, let me drink this poison, for all the living entities may thus become happy because of me. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued. After informing Bhavani in this way, Lord Shiva began to drink the poison. And Bhavani, who knew perfectly well the capabilities of Lord Shiva, gave him her permission to do so. Text 42. Therefore, Lord Shiva, who is dedicated to auspicious, benevolent work for humanity, compassionately took the whole quantity of poison in his palm and drank it. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Although there was such a great quantity of poison that it spread all over the universe, Lord Shiva had such great power that he reduced the poison to a small quantity so that he could hold it in his palm. One should not try to imitate Lord Shiva by smoking ganja and other poisonous things. But those who try to imitate Lord Shiva by smoking ganja and other poisonous things will certainly be killed because of such activities. Just give me a minute.
Lord Shiva can do whatever he likes. Does it say that thing?
Sorry?
Did you read Lord Shiva can do whatever he likes?
Okay, one should not try to imitate Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva can do whatever he likes, but those who try to imitate Lord Shiva by smoking ganja and other poisonous things will certainly be killed because of such activities. Okay. It's only displaying the desktop instead of displaying anything else. It's weird. Okay, anyway, I'll speak without it. Can you just skip this? Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. See if this works. So today we are discussing on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is one of the most could say iconic or depicted pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where if we go to India, in the cultural iconography of India, this vision of Lord Shiva drinking poison is frequently depicted. Just give me a minute if I can try to project it from here. Where is this thing? I really wanted to write and draw some things to explain today. Okay. I think this might work. You can just remove this. Yeah, this is working. Thank you. So, I'll talk about this pastime in three broad parts. First, I'll talk about the context of the pastime in what is happening in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then I'll talk about the content of the pastime, what exactly is happening, and then I'll talk about the relevance or the implication of the pastime in today's world. If you see, the Srimad Bhagavatam is like a huge conversation between Shukdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. So Parikshit Maharaj has been spoken the conversation by Shukdev Goswami, and within this conversation many things are talked about. And now we are in the 8th canto over here. So it is a reasonable inference that probably half the time is over, at least 1/3 of the time is over. Of the 7 days, Srimad Bhagavatam's 10th canto is the largest. At the same time, there is a lot of build-up for that. Now, in the build-up for that, there are many stories that are told by Parikshit Maharaj by Shukdev Goswami. So normally, whenever any scripture, any book is there, that has two aspects to it. There is a timely aspect to it, and there is a timeless aspect to it. So, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight. The physically raising his weapons to fight is a timely message. It is not that everybody who follows the Bhagavad Gita has to become an archer and fight, or has to physically fight necessarily. The timeless message of the Bhagavad Gita is that we need to surrender to Krishna. We need to become harmonized with the will of Krishna, as indicated by Arjuna in his concluding declaration, Karishye Vachanam Tava. So that concluding declaration that I will do your will, that is the timeless message of Krishna. But on the other hand, if we consider specific verses, arise and fight, Krishna tells Arjuna. Fight and you will attain glory. Now, if we take that literally, then your enemies have already been killed by me. Now, literally, that may not apply exactly today. We can always take the non-literal meaning and apply it, but scripture has a timely and a timeless message. And every book has this aspect to it. Even Srila Prabhupada, when he wrote his books or when he gave his talks, he was speaking for posterity, but at the same time, he was also speaking to the people who were there. So this timely and timeless, both aspects are constantly there. Now, so from that perspective, we consider the Bhagavatam and this is the Amrut Manthan Leela, and specifically the poison drinking Leela. So this has a timely aspect and a timeless aspect to it. Now the timely aspect is that Parikshit Maharaj has been cursed to die unfairly. For a small mistake, he has suffered terribly. And when this has happened, it is natural. He is of course a great devotee and he will not feel any resentment, we can say, because of his transcendence. But at the same time, if we want to look at things at a human level, to understand for our application, now Prabhupada talks about Arjuna at one level as saying his whole illusion was arranged by Krishna so that the Gita could be spoken. At the same time, Prabhupada also in the first chapter says that Arjuna is thoughtful and reflective because he's considering the consequences of his actions. The second chapter, Prabhupada says that Arjuna is attached and that's why he is having tears. So we can look at things from a transcendental perspective and everything is the arrangement of the Lord. But if we look at it from a more ethical perspective, relatable for us, then okay, we can look at certain things. So the timely aspect is that Shukdev Goswami is telling stories that will reinforce Parikshit Maharaj's decision and conviction. So his decision was that he will accept what has happened. He will not try to challenge it. He will not try to counter it. He accepts the curse and he accepts that, okay, I'm going to die. Now when this happens, this is a very difficult decision. This is so extraordinary that many sages come to assemble to support him in his final journey. And yet he's quite young at that time. So when he has made this decision, at that time, if you see the overall tenor of the stories in the Bhagavatam, it is repeatedly describing characters who face unfair persecution. And their persecution is far greater than what Parikshit Maharaj has suffered. Parikshit Maharaj, we could say, at least he made some mistake. It's a minor mistake. So generally what happens is, if we have done a particular action, we get a proportionate reaction. This we understand as the principle of karma. So if the action is positive, we expect a positive reaction to come from it. Now sometimes it may happen that we may do a small action that is negative and we get a large reaction that is negative for that. Now this feels unfair. Now actually, how the Bhagavatam progresses, we could go over the entire flow of the Bhagavatam to look at the pastime that have been selected. But broadly speaking, we see that there are characters who have made far lesser mistakes than Parikshit Maharaj and still they have suffered. So, for example, if we consider let's quickly, I'll build up to the eighth canto this way. If we consider the fifth canto, there Bharat Maharaj, what he did, whether it was even a mistake, you could say it was a positive activity initially at least, he saved the deer. But then the fallout of that was he got attached, and the negative thing was that he had to go 2 lifetimes. 2 more lifetimes in the material world. That's quite a terrible thing, we may say. Then similarly, if we consider the next canto, there is the story of Chitraketu. Now Chitraketu, now we might say that was his action positive, was his action negative? Well, he laughed at Lord Śiva. And whether that was out of sarcasm or amazement, whatever it was. But for that, again, he got a severe reaction. He had to take birth as a demon. Now, it's one thing for a good person to have bad things happen to them. But for a good person to be put in a situation where they have to do bad things, that is even more painful. So when Vitrasur got a curse, he could have been cursed to become like Bharat Maharaj became a deer. That's a life in ignorance. But actually, if you see, Chitraketu was forced to become a demon, and that is actually even more painful in one sense. You have to do bad things, you have to attack the Devatas. So, if you consider this consistent theme, now we come to the 7th canto, it's even worse. If you see Prahalad, Now, what he did was a good thing. He was actually being devoted to Krishna, and he was firmly devoted to Krishna. Normally, when nobody is doing something right and we do something right and good, we would expect that we should be appreciated. But for him, there was such a negative reaction. The attempts to assassinate him. And by whom? Not by enemies. If anybody tries to attack, nowadays there's a lot of people suffering from trauma. Just a few days ago, I was talking to one person who's become a devotee, he's a war veteran. So he said that he was in Afghanistan, and then when he came back, there are all kinds of terrible experiences, those trauma is there. So even if someone who we know is an enemy, that person tries to kill us, that's painful. That's horrifying. That can scar the person's psyche. But when somebody whom we trust, who we expect will protect us, that person tries to do something like this, that's horrendous. It's very difficult to bear that. And that is what happened to Prahlad Maharaj. So for Prahlad, what happened was that his own father tried to kill him. How much more unfair can it be than that? So now in the 8th canto, we have the story of Lord Śiva over here. And what is Lord Śiva doing? Here, he's actually doing an act of compassion. He's actually doing not a small act, but he's doing a great act. And he's selflessly acting to try to protect people. Now it's interesting, Lord Śiva is not exhibiting any partisan mentality over here. It is not that I will protect only those who are Shaivites. He's saying all living beings. So now, for wanting to do this, something like this, he is going to get poison. Now, is he confident that he will survive? Now, Parvati, his consort, has that confidence that nothing will happen to Lord Śiva. But in the Mahabharata, this theme comes repeatedly that in a war, there is no certainty of who will win. That normally we might think this army is much more powerful, they have much better weapons and they should win easily. But it doesn't work like that. In today's world, there are two big wars going on. And one thing that has become clear is there are no quick victories in wars. So there is a certain level of uncertainty over. And that's why Lord Śiva, he is going to risk his life. When he's going to risk his life, at that time, what happens? Is he sure about it? Well, he has confidence in his power, but still we don't know. This is an unprecedented historical situation where poison that can destroy the whole universe is coming out. And when such poison is coming out, at that time, what do you do? How do we deal with such poison? So Lord Śiva is risking his own life for that purpose. So here, that now each of these situations, if you want to take a common denominator over here, is that all of these situations could be considered unfair. Each one of these situations, what did I do to deserve something like this? This shouldn't be happening to me. It is unfair. And we could say that's true. But the fact is that every one of these characters accepts gracefully what happens to them. Now it's going beyond gracefully, it's voluntarily. In fact, we see Prahlad and Lord Śiva. Prahlad actually could have any moment said, okay, I'll stop worshipping Vishnu and all these problems will go away. Lord Śiva could have said, it's not my business. It's the Devatas and the Asuras. They wanted nectar. So it's their problem. Let them solve it. He doesn't think like that. He's actually extending himself over here. So the act of, in Bhakti, our focus is not so much on proportionality. I did so much for you. You can't even acknowledge what I did for you. Well, a devotee does what they do for Krishna primarily. And while doing for Krishna, we also are trying to serve other living beings in the world. So the context is that there's a timely aspect to this by which the decision of Parikshit Maharaj to accept the poison in the form of the snake bite is being reinforced. Okay, what you did was the right thing. Continue on with it. So that's the context of the pastime. Now let's look at the content of the pastime. So in this I'll talk about two main parts. And what is described over here is in one sense the Bhagavatam. This is a very profound book. Like the Bhagavad Gita is a poetry, the Bhagavatam is also describing something which is a layered narrative. Yes, it is describing the battle between the Devatas and the Asuras. And it is also describing how the churning of the ocean happens and the churning of the heart happens. In fact, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on the Bhagavatam says that when we study the Bhagavatam, and he says when he is studying the Bhagavatam, he also uses the metaphor of churning. That what the acharyas do is that they churn the Bhagavatam. Just like there is a churning of the ocean, there is a churning of the Bhagavatam. So churning, in one sense it's meant to happen at three levels, or it's broadly not meant to. Churning of the ocean, churning of the text, and churning of the heart. So churning of the ocean is where what has happened over there, and that is what is described in the narrative. Now, to understand the significance of what has happened, that's why we have the acharyas, that's why we have their commentaries. And commenting on the Bhagavatam is not just a historical activity done by acharyas. Srila Prabhupada wanted that the Bhagavatam classes happen every day. That means he wanted there to be a living tradition. And we also understand each one of us is meant to develop a personal relationship with the Bhagavatam, and we also churn the text. And then ultimately it is not just a matter of churning the text out there. The text is meant to inspire our hearts. Sadhyo ruddhya avrudhyate. It says in the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, second verse, that when we hear the Bhagavatam, it is Krishna who manifests in our heart. Tat kshanat, soon it will happen. In the heart that will manifest. So there is the churning of the ocean, there is the churning of the text, and the churning of the heart. So the Devatas and Asuras, it is for one particular incident historically that both of them have come together for a higher cause. There is practically very little description of incidents when the Devatas and the Asuras come together. Normally the Devatas and Asuras were fighting against each other. And now what does this mean? Then the Devatas and the Asuras are coming together to do something. That we may say they want to churn the nectar. And they are together churning. So this is the nectar of immortality. So actually speaking, if we consider that we all have a higher side and we have a lower side. We could call this higher side as the intelligence, we could call the lower side as the mind, we could call the higher side as we could use it, we could call it as the conscience, or we could call it as the pure side within us. We could call it as we have a higher side and we have a lower side. So what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is what we should be doing and what we should not be doing. He says that we should act in such a way that our higher side lifts up our lower side. Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet. He says, elevate yourself with yourself. Don't degrade yourself with yourself. What we should not happen is that the lower side should not drag the higher side down. Atmaiva ya atmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. That the lower side should be elevated by the higher side. Not that the higher side be degraded by the lower side. So sometimes now there are two models of spiritual advancement. One is where the higher side keeps going higher and the lower side keeps going lower. Now what does higher side keep going higher and lower side being lower means? That publicly we try to act as if we are very pure and saintly and calm and advanced. And internally, there is anger, there is resentment, there is craving. And those feelings we bury deeper and deeper inside. So what happens by this? There is a huge tension that is created. And this kind of spiritual growth, would put spiritual in double quotes, this is unsustainable. This will lead eventually a tension and it will lead to a collapse. Just like a rubber band, we stretch too much. The rubber band is stretched too much, it just breaks apart. So like that, if we are elevating our higher side and degrading our lower side, or rather, our lower side is going down, but the higher side, we are trying to pretend it's going upper and upper and upper. Then what happens? Eventually, this tension will become bigger. And when it snaps, it will come downwards. So the lower side will drag the higher side down also. This is how fall downs happen. Sometimes somebody may think, this person is such a great devotee. I thought this person gives such classes, such kirtan, so many projects. And then what was happening was that, yes, externally growth was happening and externally position was being acquired. External performance of the activity is going on better and better. But internally, there was a contamination of the consciousness, maybe even a corruption of the consciousness. That was not addressed. So here, why am I talking about this particular dynamic? Because when we are growing, if we consider there is a divine side within us, there is a demoniac side within us. So if this is our heart and there's a churning of the heart going on. So the churning of the heart is supposed to happen in such a way that actually the way this growth should be happening is that if this is my higher side, this is my lower side, then actually when we grow, the higher side should be moving upwards and the lower side should also be moving upwards, and both of these should come closer to each other. Now what does this mean? That means we all will have anger. We all may have some amount of lust or some amount of greed or envy or whatever. Now, in the darkest of our moments, in the weakest of our moments, maybe when in the past we would get angry, we want to physically beat someone up. Or we might physically hit someone. But as we become purified, we may still feel angry, but even in the worst moments of our anger, we won't physically beat someone. That's out of question. I'm not going to do that. So that's indicative that both sides are getting elevated. Now, will that happen? It may or may not happen. But that's what is ideal. So Devatas and Asuras working together indicates that both these sides are working for the sake of nectar. See, even our mind, we may call it our enemy, but at one level, the Devatas and Asuras have same desires. Both want to be happy, both want to live forever, both want to be immortal. The difference is in the means. So Devatas and Asuras, what is the difference? It is not so much in terms of their desires. It is more in terms of their boundaries. The Devatas and the Danavas, the Asuras, what is the difference? They have, the desires are the same. Now we can say both have material desire, that is true. But ultimately, both also want to live forever, the same. But it is their boundaries that are different. The Devatas will try to stick within the boundaries of Dharma. The Asuras will go beyond the boundaries of Dharma. So for us, our lower side also needs to be purified. So the content of the pastime is here that the Devatas and Asuras have come together. And even after both of them coming together, still there is danger. What is the danger over here? The danger is that they are going to all be killed. So when we try to churn the heart, from within that heart certain conditionings come, certain dangers come, certain threats come upon us, and those threats, they can feel overwhelming. So now if we consider when this happens, generally speaking, if there is a trainer, an animal trainer, a tiger trainer or a lion trainer. Now when these wild animals have to be domesticated, one of the ways they are domesticated is by starving them. You'll get food only when you comply, only when you do what you're told to do. But the thing is, when this tiger trainer, when the tiger is starved, what happens it? two things happen simultaneously. It roars louder. It becomes scarier. The way it will look, the way it will roar, the way it will pace, it becomes scarier. But at the same time, while it is becoming scarier, it is not becoming stronger. It is becoming weaker. So like that, when the poison comes from within, it can appear very scary. No, I never thought I had such conditionings. I never thought I would feel so terrible. But the scarier conditionings come about. But fortunately, what is happening is, just as when the tiger is being starved, it is becoming weaker. So whatever our dark conditionings might be, they may be there, but they are becoming weaker. They are not staying the same. They are not even becoming stronger, although they may sound to be more threatening. So we have to wait. We have to wait it out. And this is where Lord Shiva, who represents the spiritual master, Lord Shiva, who represents the saintly devotee, Lord Shiva, who represents the compassion of the saintly devotee, whose actions represent the compassion. Now that is where it comes in. So I'll conclude with that part. So the content of the pastime is describing this inner struggle, the churning of the heart and the poison that comes from within the churning, till eventually the nectar will come. So now when the poison comes, what do we do? So I'll talk about the relevance of the pastime and then I'll conclude. So broadly speaking, when here there is Lord Shiva doing something for those who haven't really done anything for him except ask him for help. So Lord Shiva's compassion is being seen. Now the key difference between compassion, there are many different words. There is compassion, there is justice, and then on the opposite side of justice is apathy. Apathy. Now, that means, justice means, okay, you do this, you will get this. Apathy means, okay, it's your problem, I'm not going to get involved. Compassion means, even if you have done something wrong, still I will help you. So, justice means if you deserve this much help, you'll get this much help. Apathy means you've done this much, but still you'll get only this much, or you'll not get anything at all. So, it's especially, we as a movement may talk about compassion, but then sometimes when our own devotees are in some trouble, then we may not offer them any help at all. And when they feel apathy over there, that can be very, if not faith damaging, it can definitely be harmony disrupting. So devotees may not lose their faith in Krishna, but that may disrupt the harmony of the community. So here, those who have done practically nothing for Lord Shiva except come and ask him, Lord Shiva is now going to show great compassion to them. He's going to risk his life. So when Srila Prabhupada came to America, it was an act of compassion. Nobody from America had done anything for him. Now, of course, later on, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, the first generation, what they did is extraordinary. And serving Srila Prabhupada and spreading the movement across the world and sacrificing in extraordinary ways. But at the same time, initially when Prabhupada came, he had no guarantee of any reciprocation. He had no guarantee of even any acknowledgement, any reception, not to speak of recognition or reciprocation. But still Prabhupada came. That was his courage, that was his compassion. In many ways, when Prabhupada came to America, he took up the problems of everyone who tried to connect with him. No, it was not just the devotees did service. That whenever there are followers, there are disciples, it is not a one-way street. One thing is they may give service and that is good. But they also require attention. And it's not just attention in terms of casual attention, just talk with them for a few minutes. If you really want to get into a relationship, you have to spend time with them, you have to deal with their issues. And dealing with all the issues that came up, the managerial issues, the personal issues, the logistical issues. Now that, in many ways, was like poison. There were many times when Prabhupada said that, if only I had time, I would focus on writing books. Now Prabhupada made time for writing books by sacrificing his sleep. But still, he also spent a lot of time in taking care of devotees, in managing the movement. And that was, in many ways, like poison. Of course, it is a burden of love, as Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam commentaries. Not a burden of the beast, but still it was a burden. And Prabhupada would do that, so he is voluntarily drinking poison over here. And by Krishna's mercy, of course, just that Lord Shiva was protected, Prabhupada was also protected. Prabhupada was also blessed profusely by Krishna in an unparalleled way. And then, now what does this mean for us? I'll conclude with that. Relevance for us is that can we drink poison? Now, it depends. Prabhupada says that yes, Lord Shiva can do anything, but we cannot imitate. Now, this is an interesting point about imitation. We know that in the 1960s, 70s, there was a lot of culture of people taking drugs as a way to become spiritual. Now, interestingly, this idea of drugs to spirituality, this has, from where it came and how it became very widespread. It was a big thing in those times. So from where did it come? Well, you could say multiple sources, because when historical phenomena grow, it's very difficult to find one cause for it. But one was, of course, there is this peyote which is there in the Native American tradition. The other, interestingly, is the ganja from the Indian tradition. That says Indian sadhus, they're supposed to take ganja, by which they also become spiritual. That was the idea. So that to some extent was adopted, and that was adopted not for taking ganja but LSD and so many other things like that. So the idea of drugs to spirituality, that became quite widespread. In India, there was this movie Dam Maro Dam, Hare Krishna Hare Ram, which created a lot of bad perception for ISKCON and for our devotees when they were there. They went there in the early years. But the idea is that drugs, do they lead to spirituality? That's a complete distortion. Lord Shiva is not drinking poison to become spiritual. Rather, he's already spiritual and he's taking poison as an act of expression of compassion. So now, if somebody says that I'll consume certain substance and they will make me spiritual, that has to be seriously investigated whether that will actually happen or not. So what happens is that imitation often becomes a justification for doing whatever we want to do. And there's an English word called rationalize. No. Now rationalize can also be spelled as rational. It can be spelled as rational lies. So when we rationalize, we tell rational lies. So we use our rationality, our God-given intelligence, or we misuse it to come up with justification. Say if a husband has promised his wife, I'll stop smoking. And the wife comes to the husband's room and sees there's smoke all around. Hey, what did you do? You told me stop smoking. I was not smoking. His room was very cold. I just wanted to make it warm for you when you came. So this is rationalizing. So now Duryodhana also rationalizes on the Mahabharata, and he says that actually, they say, why are you being so obstinate? You'll destroy the entire kingdom because of your obstinacy. He says, don't blame me. He says, all of us act according to the way our nature is. And this is my nature. And if you have to blame anyone, blame the creator who made this nature, who gave me this nature. No, our creator does not give us a nature to do evil. See, he's a warrior, he's a Kshatriya, and he will need a kingdom. And nobody is telling him you live without a kingdom. But when Krishna says that we'll all act according to our nature, that does not mean that somebody can be lusty and greedy and call that nature. That nature refers to the Kshatriya, Brahman, the Varnas. They act according to Varna, but we all need to actually regulate our vasanas. So when we talk about nature, there are two different aspects to it. There is our Varna, that is our particular, in the Varnashram, the tendency that we have. That Krishna says about what can repression accomplish. Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Swadharma Adunishtat. So 334-35 talks about. This whole section is talking about that we all will act according to our nature. But then there is our vasana. Vasana is the impurity, the lust, anger, greed. And there's a whole section immediately after that, 336 to 43, which talks about this has to be regulated. So this is, can't repress, don't repress, Krishna says. That everybody will serve according to their nature. But the nature is not that you can be exploitative and cruel and say that is my nature. So somebody is strong and well built, they may want to fight. They can't be very peaceful always. They need to do some physically demanding activity. But that doesn't mean they beat up innocent people. They have a tendency to fight, they become a protector, they become a warrior where that martial nature can be channeled properly. So anyway, there can be many rationalizations. So that is not what is talked about over here. Imitation is not to be done at all. But what does it mean for us? That for us, when we are trying to practice bhakti, can we drink poison? Can we take up the problems of others? Yes, we can, but according to our capacity. According to our capacity. What does that mean? That each one of us has to know what my strengths are, what my capacities are. And we can get involved in services, we can take care of others, but we can only drink poison as much as we can digest. Like if somebody is drowning and we try to save the drowning person. It's good to want to save the drowning person. But how much can we save? If that person is so heavy and we are so light, and if we try to go there, then we might get drowned. So there is a balance when we show compassion. So compassion, we could say, is wise compassion or judicious compassion. On one side, we want to be caring, but on the other side, we want to be careful. See, if you are only caring, we may end up in self-destruction. We may end up like a person who is caring and just dives in to save somebody who is very heavy and drowns themselves. On the other hand, if we are only careful and we don't care at all for others. If I talk with this person is materialistic. If I go here and do this will be materialistic. That will lead to self-obsession. And self-obsession is the opposite of spiritual consciousness. So we want both. We want to be caring and we want to be careful. So Srila Prabhupada was so exalted spiritually that he was extremely compassionate, extending. But at the same time, Prabhupada was careful. Prabhupada was once praying to Radharani, to the deities, and was very fervently praying to the deities. A devotee asked Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, I am praying to Radharani, to Krishna, that I may never fall down. Now Prabhupada was careful. So caring and careful, both are required for each one of us. According to our adhikar, how much poison can we drink? We decide accordingly. So when I started coming to America, about 10 years ago I started. So I soon realized the culture here is quite different. I had been warned about it, but I started noticing it. So once I was in a college program in Texas, and one American girl asked a question that, why do religions fight among each other? Now I explained the concept of the modes, I explained about extremism, gave an elaborate answer. He was quite happy with the answer I saw. Now after the class I was talking with the audience, she came there. And she said, this question had been burdening me for many years. I wanted to practice religion, but I thought it makes people violent. I didn't want to be a part of that. Now I've understood that religion is not just one thing. It depends on the consciousness, not the affiliation. So she appreciated the answer and she said, I'm so grateful. You relieved me of a great burden. Can I give you a hug? Now, for me as an Indian brahmachari, I grew up in a culture where we would not even shake hands with women. So now I knew enough, and he would have told me that the hug is just an expression of affection. You cannot reject that, but at the same time you cannot accept that also. So I looked at the devotee who was next to me. He was a youth preacher over there. Help me, I said. I didn't say that, I just indicated to him, save me. And he saved me in a very unexpected way. He said, he's a monk, on his behalf you can hug me. So I was thinking, that was not what the help I wanted. Then his wife was next to him. And his wife said, I am his wife, on his behalf you can hug me. So, the point I was making, so that's how we got this protection through parampara. The point is that every one of us, we have to find out what is the blend of being careful and caring for us. That if somebody is expressing their appreciation for the wisdom of Krishna that they learn, we can't just reject that. But that doesn't mean we can accept that also. So for us, what is the extent of, how can we follow in the footsteps of Prabhupada and Lord Śiva, doing any service for others, sharing Krishna consciousness, is in many ways like poison. If we take up management, there's so many mundane things we have to deal with. If we have to do outreach, philosophical outreach, we have so many misconceptions that people have. All kinds of, then we have to understand those misconceptions so that we can refute them. There's so much we may need to take in, which is like poison. But how much can we take in? It depends on our capacity. So the focus, how do we know what the balance is there? That overall our consciousness should be going toward Krishna. It's that we should feel that when we go out and do some service and come back, our attraction to deities increases. Our remembrance of Krishna increases. Our need for the shelter of Krishna increases. So I'll summarize what I discussed. 3 main points today. We are discussing this pastime of Lord Śiva. So I talked about the context, the significance of the pastime, that all the pastimes in the Bhagavatam in one sense, they are demonstrating how life treats even great characters unfairly. So each of these pastimes, there is a timely aspect and there is a timeless aspect. The timely aspect is that Parikshit Maharaj is being guided, that he should not feel bad that he has had to suffer like this. He has to die. So we talk, for example, of 4th canto, 5th canto, 6th canto, 7th canto and 8th canto. And each of these are becoming worse examples. 7th canto, 6th canto, 7th canto, that is nothing is done wrong, something good is being done and still suffering will be there. And 8th canto also, something good is going to be done and suffering is going to be there. And in content, I discussed the principle of how this churning is much more than a simplistic literal activity. The churning of the ocean, there's the churning of the text, and there is the churning of the heart. Now when the churning of the heart happens, what does it mean? The Devatas and Asuras are coming together to churn the heart. So we have our lower side and we have higher side. And spiritual growth does not mean that the higher side goes higher and the lower side goes lower. That will lead to a lot of tension and that will lead to breakdown. Actually, what spiritual growth should mean is that the higher side grows higher and the lower side also grows higher and the two come together. So this is what is recommended. So Devatas and Asuras are coming together to work, and even then there is poison coming up, and that poison is dealt by the mercy of Lord Śiva. Then I talk about the relevance of the pastime for us, that in many ways when we try to do outreach, any kind of outreach, that is like drinking poison. Because when Srila Prabhupada came from India to America, what was happening? He had to face apart from the temptations of the world, which he was largely immune to because of his purity. But at a practical level, there were challenges. So now how much poison can we drink? We discussed the extremes of, on one side, we need to be caring. We can't be just cold-hearted and be indifferent. At the same time, we want to be careful. And the test of doing both is that phalena parichayate. Phala is our consciousness gets more and more attracted towards Krishna. If we find this blend of being caring and being careful. Thank you very much. Kantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes, Prabhuji.
1 second, one question. Okay, I understand how Shiva's drinking this poison was an act of kindness for the world, obviously. We can't imitate that, that particular pastime. But as you well pointed out, just trying to help others by giving them Krishna consciousness, we have to undergo austerities and sometimes take on their problems and deal with them. That's kind of a poison. But where does the smoking of ganja come in? Because he smokes ganja. That's not an act of mercy, is it? What is it going on with that?
Okay, I have done some research. It is often said that he drinks ganja. There is no direct reference in scripture to that. Now, that's what I have found. Now, in the Shaivite tradition, it is widely said. Just like, say, there are pastimes of Krishna which are not mentioned in the direct scriptures, but there are pastimes, they are considered part of local tradition. So like that, that's what my understanding is. At least in the major Shiva scriptures, I have not found it. I'll check it. But it's two things. In one sense, that there is this principle of Lord Shiva identifying with people who are in Tamoguna so that they can be elevated. That's why he wears ashes on his body. He roams around in crematorium. So that's one reason he could be drinking ganja also. And now he's unaffected by it, but others may be affected. Now the thing is that in the Vedic tradition, what is an act of compassion can also become the cause of confusion. So that is always the tendency, always that challenge, that when we can offer spirituality as like digital 1 or 0. Do this, you're in. Do that, you're out. So the Abrahamic traditions are like that. Worship Jesus, you're in. If you don't worship Jesus, you're out. That's very simplistic at one level. But then the Vedic tradition is not digital like that. It's much more analog. If you can't do this, you do this. If you can't do this, if you do this. You can't do this if you do this. Now, the advantage of that is multiple people can be elevated by that. But the disadvantage is people may think that the level they are at is itself the highest level. They don't need to go higher. So Krishna says about karma kand, like na anyadasteti vadya. There's nothing more to do. The foolish people think like that. Vipashyata. So now even in the Shaivite tradition, those who are serious, they understand that smoking ganja is not a good thing so much. There are Shaivites who sing now, who smoke ganja, but there are Shaivites also who live quite purely. And they focus much more on love of God. Like there are the Alvars in the Sri Vaishnava tradition. There are Nayanvars, they're called in the Shaivite tradition. They are also very, very greatly devoted to Lord Shiva. So it seems that it's like an intermediate step offered that when Lord Shiva drinks ganja, does that get people interested in Lord Shiva and they become focused on Lord Shiva? Or those who are religious, they see Lord Shiva drinking ganja and that's why they start drinking ganja. Which one will happen? That is difficult to say. It's like, that's the challenge. Say, if there are 2 kids, if a parent has 2 kids, now one of them is very good, gets 100% marks. The other barely scrapes through with 40% marks. Now, if say, the 40% comes to 70%, and the father says, very good, well done. And that is true. For the 40% kid to come to 100% is going to be very difficult. The 40% comes to 70%, that's good and it's well done. But the problem is seeing that the 100% person may come down to 70% also. The 100% person might also come down to 70%. And then the father says, not well done, what have you done? Don't do this, isn't it? So, if you see the worship of the Devatas in the Bhagavad Gita, there are both of these talked about. Normally we quote the verses from 7:20 to 23 where Alpamedasa or Kamaistaiste Hritagyana, that they are less intelligent, those who worship the Devatas. So that is talking from this level. Somebody who can worship Krishna starts worshipping the Devatas. But then if you go to 17.4 in the Gita, where Krishna says, Yajante Satvika Devan, Yaksharaksham Sirajasan, Pretan Bhutaganam Shane, Yajante Damasajana. That those who worship the Devatas are actually in Sattva-guna. Those who worship the Yakshas, they are Rajoguna. Those who worship the Bhutas, that they are the Tamoguna. So it requires a certain level of Sattva-guna to worship the gods also. So in that sense, what is offered as a act of compassion can be misunderstood as and can lead to a confusion. So that caution and that danger is there. Okay, thank you.
I can't resist. It'll take 1 minute to just tell this little anecdote surrounding this. This is the very first class I ever gave in Los Angeles, 1975. We're going back 50 years. And I remember, the class was okay, and in the end, there was a question about Lord Shiva smoking ganja. And somehow or other, I had never read, I think Prabhupada writes in his book somewhere that he smokes ganja, but I hadn't read that. And I said, no, Lord Shiva doesn't smoke ganja. And then I think it was Radha Ballava said, yes, Lord Shiva smokes ganja. I said, oh, sorry, I didn't read that. But I found, now I know I was telling the truth, right in front of the deities. I didn't tell them.
Yeah.
But that's a very fascinating, this explanation of that. Because it's true. I don't remember reading a verse in the Bhagavatam that Lord Shiva was smoking ganja. But it's at least one purport, or not more that Prabhupada says. We shouldn't try to imitate Shiva by smoking ganja.
Yes, that is true. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakti. Can you talk one to one?